when the Germans began arresting Greek Jews in 1943 in Nazi-occupied Greece. In order to evade capture, Jack's father contacted the underground resistance movement that helped lead them to Greek Orthodox monasteries and convents that were sheltering any Jews who sought help. Upon Germany pulling out of Greece, Jack and his family returned to find his home occupied by strangers and his father's business ruined. In 1955, Jack and his family immigrated to the United States, eventually residing in Memphis, Tennessee in 1956. Jack recalls the anger he felt at the way his family suffered, but now uses his experiences to tell people what happened. Jack has played a vital role, along with other survivors, in educating Tennessee students about what happened during the Holocaust and has been a keynote speaker at the annual Tennessee Holocaust Commission Day of Remembrance. So these are our two speakers who are going to be sharing their story, and they'll be having questions, prompts to them to share their story and think about what it means to them today, to be sharing it with our community and our people. I'll turn it over to Sherry to kick off and go from there.
So just before Cammie starts with the questions, we just wanted to remind everyone to mute yourselves. I know some people kind of got on a little late, so we just want to remind everyone to mute so that there won't be background noise when we're hearing from the speakers. And also, we talked about in the beginning that Cammie is recording this, so, and then we'll be able to share it after. So I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that even though you might not be fully on camera, you will be on camera. So just wanted to let you know. So Cammie, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone at ZBT. This has been so wonderful, and we're really excited to be able to share these stories. Our first question that we'll be walking through, I should say we'll be asking our survivors questions. They have some folks with them who might be stepping in and speaking a little bit as well. We've asked them to keep these answers relatively brief just because we have a lot of them and in the sake of time. But there are so many resources for both on the Tennessee Holocaust Commission website and through the ZBT institution that obviously you can take advantage of on this important holiday. So I'm going to start things off and ask our survivors just to tell us a little bit about their childhood. So where did you grow up? What was your family life like? Paint us a picture of everything before the war and anti-Semitism really started escalating. Either of you can take it away.
Will, can you hear us? Okay, yes. I have Nate up. So this
for me, well, the first thing I would like to do is thank you all for coming to do that for me and for the generation thereafter. And I am very happy that you're doing it. Thank you very much. My name is Nathan Taffel. In Poland, and in Yiddish I was called Naftali. I grew up in Poland, as you know. My father and mother had 7 daughters and 3 boys, and they were farmers. They were very well to do, and after a while, the daughters got older, so they decided to find Jewish husbands. So they decided to move to a city called Radomish Wielki. While they moved to Radomish Wielki, I found out that one of my little brothers on the farm died from diphtheria. So, and some other things from the farm that I could remember. At that time, it was very emotional to hear their experiences for me. After a while, I was born in Radomish Wielki as the youngest, and this is the picture you can see in white is me, my sisters, that one gentleman that stands tall is one of my brother-in-laws who lived in Tondorf. While living in Radomish, we had a store or a business exchanging grains for flour. I attended Hebrew school, public school, and I had fun. I was spoiled rotten, being the youngest in the family. Our house was next door to the school. I'll show you the house eventually.
Do you want him to continue on, or do you, at this point? Sherry?
No, I think that's good. And then the next question will go into kind of what we're going to ask another question after. So let's hear from Jack. Thank you so much, Nate.
What was that?
So FYI, my dad is hard of hearing, so you're going to hear my voice in the background. Hi. I'll show you this picture before he talks. That's his school picture. Can you guys see that? So why don't you tell him about where you grew up and what it was like?
I grew up on an island, the second largest island in Greece, called Evia, in a town by the seaside called Chalkis, Chalkis. That's the town that's connected with the mainland by a very small bridge. It's about 75 yards. It has, well, before the war, we were growing up, we just going to school, playing, and really trying to help my father with his business a little bit because I was very young. My father used to take me fishing. I attended a public school as a what do you call this? The before high school.
Like elementary school.
The elementary school, and of course the Hebrew school until the war, because after the war, I still attended public school and very little of Hebrew school because we did not have a rabbi.
But so you had a brother, it was your mother, your father.
Yeah, we were four in our family. It's my mother, my father, and my late brother. And myself, of course.
And his father was a chemist, so he owned a cosmetic store.
Cosmetic business. He was imported. My father studied in Alexandria, Egypt, with his older brother that was very well established there. He attended a British college and studied 7 different languages, among which was Italian and French, and that's what he was imported his essential oil for his cosmetic business.
So my dad also was kind of expected to take over the business, but that comes later. So they all the family lived close to the synagogue, so everybody was around, everybody was close, everybody, I would say what we would consider upper class here in the States, but that kind of didn't matter after the war hit.
Well, before the war, talking about the closing, before the war and after the war until 1955, as I can tell, the community, the Greek community was very close, mostly around the synagogue. And the synagogue has an oven that at Passover, every family was baking, helping each other to bake our own matchas. The flour was brought from Athens, so there was the flour to make matcha with. Before the war, there was a a group of young Jewish people that they were bringing, every year they were bringing a choreographer from Athens, a professional one, and they staged the Purim show with Esther. And that was for the whole public. The whole town was gathering in what do you call it?
In the square, the town
Yeah.
square. It was Jews and Greek Orthodox all together.
Thank you. So when did you first start to understand the Nazi power in your town? And what did that look and feel like?
That's me.
Yeah, did you hear her?
Yeah, when I was a young kid, the German Jewish people who couldn't afford to leave and go to different countries were sent into Poland. And while they came into Poland, they also arrived in our town. And they were huddled with my family and told them the atrocities that happened, like for Kristallnacht and so forth. Every time that I tried to listen in with my younger sister, my parents told me, go play. Obviously, it was nothing pleasant for us to listen to. After a while, I attended public school naturally, and it was next door to my house. And I continued doing that for a short time. And after a while, I got a little older, so I helped doing chores for my father and mother and my family because they were older. In my house that I lived in was the most wonderful, wonderful place to be. We had the girls singing, we had enjoyment, we loved every minute of it. We were a very, very close family. But after they came into Radomish, which Radomish is in Galicia, near town of Poland. So when they arrived there, they started to looking for husbands, and my 4 sisters got married. And I was home doing little chores here and there and going to school in the Hebrew school and so forth. After a while, my life was very good. I enjoyed living because I was spoiled so rotten as a young kid. And then we heard that Germany is going to declare war in Poland. And Germany declared war in Poland. And when we heard that the Germans are coming towards our city, my youngest sister, father and mother, and I, we went down the basement, and we were sitting in the basement, and we heard the German soldiers, which they had steel-plated shoes, and they were walking on gravel. You could hear them from distance. So my father and I went upstairs, and my father was saying something German to a soldier, and he beat him up. There was a bigger catastrophe in my life to see my father to be beaten up. And that's in this minute, in this time, every time I mention it, my heart goes out. After a while, the German soldiers came in. The Wehrmacht was a regular army, was fighting the war. And after they came in, they settled in the city of Radomish in the center of the town, because the town had a big, large center. And being young, they announced that anybody Jewish 13 years of age or older should wear a Jewish Star of David. I was younger, so I mingled around a few days, and looked and see what's happening. On one particular time, I saw one of the soldiers grabbing a Jewish Orthodox Jew with a beard and put matches under his beard and burned him, and he screamed and hollered. And I couldn't stand it. I walked away. Life was quite miserable, sad. Eventually, they left. And when they left, arrived a bunch of soldiers, SS people in black uniforms, and Ukrainians, Latvians, Estonians, and Lithuanians arrived at Radomishch, who joined the SS to eliminate the Jewish people. They came in with trucks, they came in with all different equipment, and they started, with eliminating people, which I don't remember even to mention. And then the Gestapo came in and announced that they're going to go to Jewish homes, and if they find anything of any value, they'll take away. They came into our house, I remember. They went through from A to Z. They took liquor, fur, money, jewelry, anything that could get hold of. And they threaten them if they don't surrender anything else, they'll kill them. After a while, they left, and things got progressively worse. Things got very sad, and we lived there for a period of time, and we were waiting what's going to happen, actually. And to cut the story short, because I speak a long time, so the SS people came in and they announced that any man 18 to 21 should gather in the Jewish hall, and being there, me being anxious to find out what's happened to my brother, I took my bike and I was driving, and two Gestapo men with leather coats, as I remember, yelled out, "Stop, stop, stop," which I really didn't stop. And they took the guns to shoot me. My brother saw it in the window and came out and begged them, "Please let him go. It's my brother. Please let him go." And they let me go. So I, from there on, watched what I was doing. Life was very, very subdued.
Do you wanna continue? Should we stop there and continue?
No, I think that's a great place to stop. You took the words right out of my mouth, Mindy. Thank you so much, Nate. So Jack, I'm going to repeat the question just in case. We wanted to ask you, when did you first start to understand the Nazi power in your town? And what did that look like and what did that feel like to you?
So he has a speech that he usually, like something that he usually reads when we do speaking events. And I think there's a part in here that'll kind of cover it all so that we can stay on point and on time. So I'll let him.
Great, thanks.
Of course, the war started, the Greeks started the war with Italy. And of course, the beginning, Greek power was overpowering the Italians. And that's when the Germans stepped in and, of course, invaded Greece. Once they invaded Greece, our total life has changed completely. There was curfew, I think it was 9 o'clock at night, and that was enforced brutally. If they find out somebody out the street without a permit to go to work, they shoot him right there and then. Our home was very close to the German barracks, and it was hardly a day that we would not wake up to the sound of a machine gun killing people. In order to take the people to the cemetery, they had to come by our home. There was a truck with hay, and that's where they were throwing the bodies on. There was a guard car in front of the truck and one behind. And behind those three vehicles, there was the
Fire truck.
the fire truck, the fire department washing the street from the blood that was dripping down the street. Right above our home, well, for us as children, we used to open a little bit the shutters to watch what was going on when we heard the noise of the truck. And right on above our home, it seems that there was a young man in the truck that was not completely dead. And he tried to jump over the truck, which he did. The guard behind it stopped. They killed the guy right there and then, and they threw him back in the truck like nothing happened. To see that in the eye of a child, it was devastating.
And just to put in there, at this time, he was probably about 8 or 9 years old.
Of course, hunger was widespread since the Germans were confiscated most of the food in the land to feed themselves. The fear was widespread. There was, if anybody was going to either a pastry shop or a coffee shop to get a cup of coffee, they always tried to stay as back from the front door as possible, because at any time, the Germans could come and block the square and start picking up people, either to interrogate or as hostages, and start counting from the front, of course. As I mentioned before, my father was speaking 7 languages, and that was Italian and German. And that way, my father established his relation with the resistance, because when the Germans were picking up people for interrogate, most often they would call my father to act as an interpreter, and that he established his relations with them. Okay, now that as children, of course, we used to play close to my home, but a little bit further down, there was an old Turkish market that was left from the Turks when they were occupying Greece back for 400 years. And there was a square in front of that, and we used to play soccer. In front, that market was made as an army depot from the Germans, and there was a guard in front of it. Since no father would spend money to buy us a ball actually to play soccer, we used to get we used to find a sack and stuff it with paper or rugs or anything we could find, shape it into a ball, tie it up with a wine, and play ball. So we play ball over there. One day, there were a couple of people that came in and came by there, and they actually gave us a ball. Actually, not a soccer ball, but nevertheless, there was a small ball, an actual ball we could play. But there was a catch to it. They wanted us to kick the ball to the guard as often as we could. So we did. In the beginning, it was a play. We kicked the ball to him, he kicked the ball to us, and so on. And every now and then we kicked it to him, he kicked it back to us. But the last time we did, he took his bayonet out and busted our ball. So we start calling him names and jeer him and all that. And we saw him taking his rifle off his shoulder. So we scattered. He followed me. And as I turned the corner, he took a shot at me. Thank God I had already turned the corner, but there was a young fellow that was crossing the street, and he took the bullet that meant for me. So we disappeared. Anyway, the reason for that, the reason they wanted us was to throw the ball to the guard, was to distract the guard, to get him away from there. That I'm talking about the underground, the resistance, which they threw a couple of grenades to the depot. Didn't do much damage, but along with another incident that happened about the same day, there was 110 people were picked up from the town, took them to a hill nearby, and shot them and left them there dead.
So to finish up, like to end this, the answer to the question, at this point, my grandparents decided it was time to do something. So my grandfather, that's his mother and father. And these are their two new identities. So at this point, my grandfather had reached out to the resistance movement, to the underground, and they went from Jack Cohen. My dad became Antonio Athanasopoulos.
Thank you for sharing. I'm actually, Jack, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you one more question before we go back to Nate, which is, how did you cope emotionally with your Holocaust experiences? What kept you going as you and your family sort of assumed these new identities and retreated from society?
Really, like I said, the fear was widespread over there, and we were not, at the time there, we were not aware of the German picking up Jews or taking to concentration camp or things like this. Though my father used to stop at night in somebody's home that had a clandestine radio, and they would listen to the BBC, to the German, to the British broadcast. And they learned, but as far as they're concerned, at that time, there was just a rumor. Nobody would confirm it until the Italians fell and the Germans took over the whole country. Because before that, the Italians practically occupied the southern part of Greece, while the Germans the northern part. And after Italy fell, then the Germans started picking up the Jews from the northern part. And that's where my father contacted the underground and made the arrangement. Before that,
okay, hold on, you're getting a little off track. I think one of the main things that kept him going at his age, and I'll show you a picture, is that he stayed with his family. It wasn't, they didn't separate the men from the women or the parents from the children. So when
or having a star,
yeah,
you know,
they never had that.
We never had a concentration camp.
So because their family was together, this is the first family that they started with as they hid. And you can see this is my grandmother, and she does not look happy at all. And here's my dad right here with a smile on his face, because again, he's with his mom and his dad and his brother, and it's an adventure. They didn't know where they were going or when they were coming home, and they were safe with their mom and dad.
So we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about where they went and what that experience was like, but I'm going to turn it back over to Sherry now.
So this question is for Nate. So I want to talk to you about your experience in going to the concentration camp. So prior to going to the concentration camp, did you know you were going? And can you Did you go with your family? What happened once you arrived? And yeah, so can you talk about your experience in the concentration camp?
Did you know you were going to the camp?
No. I did not have any idea what was going on because the adults were huddling constantly. And one particular night, my father and mother hired a gentleman with a horse and wagon, and we got on in the middle of the night to a city called Tarnów, where my oldest sister and her husband and son lived in a ghetto. Obviously, they knew the consequences, so they tried to avoid it and tried to save us. We went over there. We stayed in the ghetto for a period of time. I do a lot of different chores and did a lot of different work, helping provide food and carrying and so forth. After a while, my brother-in-law, who was the oldest in the family, got in touch with some people and communicated and found out that 4 of my sisters are in Smoczka. That's a little town which was occupied by German soldiers, and they found a gentleman. If they paid him or what they did, I don't know. And they got a hold of my brother-in-law, and they communicated and told him that I am, at that time I'm not there, I was still in Tarnów, and they were fixing roads for the German army and doing odd chores. Eventually, to cut the story shorter, things got worse in Tarnów. People were killed, and they knew what was happening. And through the communication, they thought they can save us, my sister and I, and they hired somebody, my sisters hired somebody with a truck to come and get in touch with my brother-in-law. And he did. And this gentleman spoke German, so he must have been a Sudetendeutsch. So he was telling what the situation was, which I don't know. And my father and mother put us coats on, and my brother-in-law, and put us to the door. And we stood there. And he told us that we're going on a trip. We shouldn't cry, we shouldn't cough, we shouldn't sneeze, we shouldn't do anything at all. And just about on that time, I looked to say goodbye to my family, and my father, mother, and my sister and her son. Had the door open the bedroom and see myself and my sister going with the gentleman.
Once you were in the camp, how did you cope every day?
Before I get there. After we arrived in that camp, we were all lined up, and the Gestapo selected people that they kept and selected people that they took to the forest, which the forest was situated in camp. And they shot him, he could hear shots. On some miracle, some way, I don't exactly can say I survived. I survived, and I worked there very diligently. I worked on the road, I swept and loaded sand, did all different things. And on many occasions, the Gestapo came in and they found people that were feeble or that couldn't do anything. They took in the forest and shot them. And one occasion, they picked me up to be shot because of my age. And the foreman came over and he says, he's a good worker, let him go. He let me go and survive there. I worked there for a whole year. We finished the roads. Then they told us that we're going to go on a tour city, Mielec. Mielec wasn't very far away, but it was constructed before the war by the Polish people to produce aeroplanes, but they never finished it. But the Germans took over and put concentration camp Jews in there, and there were quite a lot of Jewish people in that concentration camp. A lot of them, I can't remember how many. And when we arrived in concentration camp in Flossenburg, in Mielec, we moved our arms up, if you can see it, and they put a KL. KL stands for Konzentrationslager or concentration camp in English. And we were tattooed by a chessman who was sitting and tattooing us. Eventually, German engineers and other people came and picked up people for them to work for. I was picked up to work at the Versand, which was a transportation and all other things. And I worked there and I do different chores. I fixed parts for airplanes that were shut down by the Russians. I also cleaned offices, and I also cleaned all different facilities in the German headquarters. And I'd also repaired planes. On a particular time, they sent me to get some parts from a different department. And I came back, and one of the foremen grabbed me and put me on a pedestal and gave me 27 lashes on my back. And I cried very much, it hurt so bad. And I came back to my bench, and I sat down and I cried. And the German engineer asked me what happened. I told him, he just shook his head. I worked there very hard. We lived in a barrack. We had no toilet facilities, just a hole in the ground. We had no showers. We had no washing facilities. We were dirty, filthy, and lousy. Food was considered bread and oil twice a day, and soup for lunch. We worked from daylight to at night in a place. It was very cold. By that time, they decided that they take us to a place and take away all our clothes and put on striped uniforms, wooden shoes, and a hat, and take us to a place called Wieliczka. In Wieliczka, I also like to mention it that I had an incident. One of my teeth was infected. My jaw was swollen, and I found a Jewish dentist, but he had no facilities or no equipment to pull my tooth. So he found a Jewish man with pliers, and he pulled it. And up to this day, I cannot imagine how much pain a person can endure under those circumstances. But anyway, we arrived in Flossenburg. We were put in barracks. Flossenburg in itself was a political concentration camp for German political prisoners and for German homosexuals. They lived separate, but they built barracks, and they brought us in there because we couldn't go. There was a short distance to Auschwitz, but they couldn't get into Auschwitz, gas chambers, because trains were lined up all the way for other people. So they decided to take us, since we're knowledge, to repair planes in Flossenburg. I worked in Flossenburg, and I did repair planes. I did a lot of different things. And during the course of time, I found out that my brother was there. My brother was there, and I met him, and he was telling me the atrocities that he went through. He said when he was in that Radamish, in that hall, they took him out, they dug graves, long graves, and they brought out Jewish mothers with little babies. And the SS of different nations took those babies and hit them against the wall and killed them. The mothers had to line up, and they got shot in the back and they fell in the graves. Some of them must be still alive. And my brother and the other guys had to bury him. And on another occasion, they told him to dig another big grave, which they did. And as I mentioned to you, they came in, the SS, with trucks, and one particular truck had a window in the back. At the window, I found out later, he told me, was to see if they gassed them, fumigate them, or whatever you would call it. And they were all dead, and they threw them out into the grave and buried him. Life in Flossenburg was very, very bad. People were dying of typhus and all different diseases. I slept in a barrack with a person who was emaciated. He had no color, he was dead, he was brown. And they didn't have the crematorium going full blast to accommodate all the dead ones. So they set up fireplaces in front of the barracks and burned them. Eventually they burned them. And I kept going. And while working in the factory,
So
one
the
particular,
factory is what
for the airplanes,
kept you going.
I sat next to a gentleman from my town, a young boy, and we ate soup, and he was eating the soup, which stands up in my eyes like now. And in the soup, he found a human finger. And I was find out if he's going to eat it, and I don't know if he did or not. Life was so bad, we were treating him so badly. They took us in to get showers in cold water, and it was freezing, and they beat us if we didn't say it, and the lights still stayed with us. We were beaten up constantly. I worked there very hard. Food was very bad. We only received twice a day bread and soup. At that period of time, it was a year that I worked there. I'm cutting it short because of time of.
I think they have more questions, so.
And I decided, I lost course. And I worked there, and then all of a sudden, after a year's period, we saw Swiss people coming into the German SS quarters and whispered and talked, or we didn't hear what. And they left, and we stood there. And then they were announced together in the center of the camp, and we did. And they brought out 4 people, and we had to watch them be hung because they start to escape. They dug under the electric fence, and they got across the camp, and the SS person on the tower saw him and shot him. For a penalty, he took 10 people from the barrack and hung him for not watching the escape. Life was horrible. You can't imagine it. I can't imagine it. It was horrible. They loaded us up then in trucks and put us on a truck, and we took us to a distance which we didn't know. There were no bathroom facilities or cattle trucks, and they put the engine on, and the American Air Force saw the engines and the SS guards watched us. So they destroyed the engine and they shot at the SS. I don't know if they killed them or not. But we had casualties. And they took us and put us on another train. And we kept on going for a short distance of time. And they came down, the Americans, and they shot the engines and the SS people. After that, they decided that they can't make any headway. So they had a horse and wagon with food and all different equipment loaded to the gills, and 2 wagons empty with horse and wagons. And they took us off, and they took us off on a march. It was in April. It was raining, it was cold, we had no clothes, and we kept on walking. Anybody that couldn't walk from the wooden shoes that we had created blisters or sickness or everything. My brother's legs swelled up, and I dragged him to stay in the front so he didn't get shot. The other people that couldn't walk get shot and thrown on the wagons. And we went out from Germany to a different place called Stammsried. When we arrived in Stammsried, there was a lot of us already killed. There was 3 of us left, and we stayed there. The SS took us in the forest with the intention to shoot us. They lined us up, and all of a sudden, a German army from the regular army with 1 arm shut down or killed or broken or whatever, I don't know. He gathered them, and they huddled, talked, and they disappeared. They disappeared, and we stood there in awe. But my brother saw our pig farm, and there were some pigs, so we walked towards there, and we attacked the trough, and we started eating the pig food because we were starving, and the lady in the house threw us bread. And we ate the bread, and we waited on the haymow, and we stayed there overnight. The next morning, we found out that the American people, the soldiers, were very short distance away. So we walked there, and when we arrived, I couldn't speak English. They couldn't speak English, German or Yiddish. So we asked them if there's a Jewish man that could speak Yiddish. We found from all the soldiers 1 Jewish man who spoke Yiddish. And they introduced me to him, and they gave me a pair of pens, and he gave me a shirt and shoes, and he gave me a can of jam, which I devoured for 4.5 years. I never had any sweets or anything. So he took it away. He said, "No, don't eat it. You're going to get sick. You're going to get sick." So eventually, they decided that they had to leave to go to Czechoslovakia from there. We stayed in Stammsried for a few days, tried to get civilized, my brother and I. The other people don't know, but we heard that 10 people were in 1 barn, and they SS arrived there to hide, and they shot them. We stayed in Stammsried for a few days to recover. After a while, we heard that the city Schrandorf has a hall with Jewish survivors from a different area. We arrived there, and I stayed there, and I tried to learn because I had very little education and knowledge. And we kept on staying there for a while, and after that, we heard that the German lady, she was a widow, had children, that she needed a man to cut wood to keep the fireplace going, and if somebody was willing to do it. My brother and I surrendered, we went there. We stayed there, we chopped wood, cut wood, to keep their fires going and so forth.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Nate. We have a few more questions, but I want to direct the conversation back to Jack for a few minutes and give him the ability to share the rest of his story of his family and how they went into hiding. So take it away.
As I said before, after Italy fell, the Germans took over. And by taking over, they started picking up the Jews from the northern part of Greece. My father was in Athens at that time there and heard the news that it would travel rapidly. So he left the business and came home to make arrangements for us to go into hiding. We had to make a decision. We had to be, either we had to become passive and get killed, or revolt and become short heroes, or try to survive in order to become a witness of genocide and preserve it in history to educate future generations. Immediately, my father contacted the underground and to make arrangements for us to go into hiding. In the meantime, the Greek Archbishop Damaskinos wrote a letter to Hitler himself saying that we will not distinguish here between Jews and Christians. We're all citizens of Greece. Now, of course, that didn't make any difference. He never got an answer from Hitler. So arrangements were made. My father was, we were hiding 2 Italian officers in our home. So when my father made the arrangement, he made arrangements for the Italians to be shipped out of the country somehow, and then for us. My mother, okay. My mother took some beddings, some pillows, some silverware, and a couple of pots and pans, and made a bundle. And when the underground came to pick us up with a horse-driven cart, we were ready to go and face whatever destiny the Lord had designed for us. We first went to a small village very nearby the town, and we stayed there for a couple of weeks. But the village there was very close to town, and the Germans were going by the village. It was very dangerous. So for us and for the family that were harboring us. So the underground picked us up and took us to a monastery. We traveled by direction only with a couple of the resistant people that only knew where to go. And took us about 3.5 hours to reach the top plateau of the mountain. And yeah, and went to a monastery called St. George. The monastery was not designed for a long stay. The floor was clay. There was no furniture. Actually, we were only in one room, in one small room that had a fireplace and a door, no windows, no telephones, no lights, no bathrooms or anything else, no furniture. It was just a bare small room. We chopped some blocks, some woods to make actually a place to sit. And We gave,
Here.
where are we?
Basically, when they went to
Okay.
the monastery, there was nobody there except the monastery keeper and his wife. So there were only two people, and the monastery was completely away from civilization. So they felt safe, but you never know who would come to the monastery or who could collaborate. So by the time they got there, not realizing how long they were going to be there, the next thing they had to figure out is what to do for food immediately, because there wasn't any place to go to a market or anything like that.
We had no money to begin with, but even if we had, there were no place to go buy food. So the monastery keeper's wife gave us a loaf of bread and some cheese and some olives. But that lasted us for a couple of days. So the big question was how to survive, what to eat. The monastery keeper pointed me how to find edible mushrooms. My mother would take them and boil them and make mash out of them and make a patty like a hamburger and put them on the charcoal so we had something to eat over there. The monastery keeper, wife, also saw my mother that there were plenty of greens around the area, like dandelions and things like this. My mother would take it and cut the roots, clean them, and boil them, and we had some salad. But that couldn't happen, it could not last us for every day to eat mushrooms, dandelion. Fortunately, there was a guy that showed me how to make charcoal.
Okay, hold on. We go into a whole nother story. So just let me kind of stop him, because I know you guys have other questions. There's so many stories to tell, but basically at this point they were trying to find ways to survive. They found out that that their grandmother, would have been my great grandmother, was captured by the Germans. She was betrayed by a collaborator, and at that point, uncles decided that they were going to go to the Middle East. So from here on out, it was trying to survive. They had no idea they were going to be in this monastery for 2 years. So they were away from their home, away from their away from everybody for 2 years. All they heard was whatever the resistance happened to tell them as they were passing by. So they knew that their grandmother was gone, taken by the Germans. And then I didn't know this until later when I started researching, that there was actually a place in Athens that was a holding camp. It's called Haidari. If you can see at the bottom there, that's in Athens. And then here's the picture of my grandparents. That's their family. And the one with the arrow is his grandmother, great grandmother, that we don't know what happened to her. So from there, they just tried to survive for 2 years.
Thank you so much. So we know that all the stories could keep going on. We know we could listen to both of you speak for so long, because you all have so much to share. So our last question is, what message would you like to leave with the ZBT brothers? What would you like people to remember about you and your experiences? And what message do you want us to take away from today?
Well, we worked in that lady's home. Then I heard my brother that some Jewish guys go back to the hometown, and he was older, so he left. And while he was gone, I dreamt and I prayed and I did everything possible to get a gun and shoot the people that killed my family. But after a while, it kept on bothering me. And then my brother came back. He said he went into the house, there was no furniture. He laid down, they started pounding glass windows and breaking up. He came back, there was nothing left in the family. I cried very much, and I decided from there on, Nate, you will never hate. I don't hate. I like people. If they're good to me, I like them back. If they don't like me, I walk away. I have spoken in all different cities. I have spoken in in the mountains of I can't remember. Anyway, I received from the senator an award to be mentioned as a congressional record holder. I spoke in Pittsburgh. I spoke in people came interview me from American historian. I spoke to American soldiers. Last year, I spoke to over 100 children, and I still am going trying as long as my body allows speed. I do cut you short because it's hard for me, but it's difficult. But after a while, I decided, after hearing Americans, Jewish coming and visiting us, in July they brought me a pair of long underwear with holes in it. They gave us or supplied us food. And I resented it very much. And I said, I'm not going to America. And I started researching. And they asked, where can I get away? There's no civilization far, far away from Europe. And they suggested Australia. I signed up. They allowed 10 Jewish people, which was 10%, there were 1,000. And we drove to, they shipped us to Australia. And I lived in Australia, and I worked in the kitchen as a second chef, and then a chef. And then I worked in a Christian Brother College kitchen, and I did all different kind of work.
But your message is not to hate, correct?
What?
Your message is not to hate, that you don't hate.
No, I do not. My daughter mentioned it. I don't hate because I mentioned it. I'm going to go to work in a Christian Brother College. I'm Jewish. Would they accept me? And they would say right away. They did. And I worked there for 2.5 years. They hated me leaving to another job. After a while, I did some other jobs, and I did cooking, and I got letters from my brother that I got married and got a son. And my brother developed tremendous memories, the atrocities that he watched and see. He developed mental problems. He died young. And before he died, his biggest wish was that I should come and see him. 5 years I got a British subject, but I went to the Council of America to get a visa, and they said it takes 10 years for a Polish Jew to come, or Polak to come to the United States. So I waited, and I got I took a trip to be with my brother, and I was with him for quite a few years, but he was very sick in mental hospitals and so forth. And then I met a Jewish girl from Milwaukee, and I married. I have the greatest family in the world. Every night I say, God, give us health, longevity, and gesund for the whole family. And please think of the Jews that got buried in the wilderness in different places. I adore my family to the utmost.
He's not biased.
Mm.
He's the best father a daughter could
If
have.
it wasn't for my family, I wouldn't be here.
Thank you.
I just adore him. But then after I was 60 years old, my son gave me a 60-year birthday present and took us to meet my brother, who was in Argentina. I met my brother in Argentina for the first time. He was older, much older. And I met his family, and he was basically destitute. And he was old, naturally, and he was facilities. Then he decided, after seeing him 5 times with the family, that he would like to die in Israel, but he didn't have $200. So I provided him with money, and he went to Israel and died there.
Mm.
Thank you so much, Nate. So Jack, what about you? What kind of message would you want to give the ZBT brothers? What do you want us to remember about your story and your experience?
I'm going to say something first before we turn it over to him. I think it's super awesome and important that your other survivor also has his family member with him. I think that that's one of the major points of how a lot of us have survived, and a lot of the second generation and now third and fourth generation found their strength in their families. So a lot of kids outside don't really understand the story of their parents or their grandparents, and it's all a part of history, and it's a part of things that make us as second, third, and fourth generation who we are. So he'll tell you about the message, but one of the important things that I got out of it as a second generation is that there are things that I've done and I've seen that I never understood why. Like my grandmother, when she was still alive, would always light her Shabbos candles with a bowl, and it had water, a little bit of oil, and a cotton ball. And I never understood why in this day and age, good Lord, we all are fine. We, have nice cars, we have nice house. Why can't we just get Yaya a candle? And she would never use a candle. And I never really understood that it was because she was memorializing those 2 years of not having anything but the whatever she could find in the trees or in the ground to be able to make a wick. Little things, we would have dinner and didn't understand why other people were going to the grocery store and we were fine picking yard dandelions, yard weeds. But all those things brought a strength from their generation to our generation that unfortunately a lot of people today don't have.
When we live today, I like you to think about the world that we live in. The Holocaust is still a contemporary issue in that it demonstrates the atmosphere in which genocides can take place. People still connect to prejudice, which are founded and illogical, and our society urges to tolerate. A lot of civil groups and other groups, they advocate tolerance. To me, there's a great difference between tolerance and acceptance. The Jews in Eastern Europe, they were merely tolerated. When Hitler came and the opportunity came, they gave him away to slaughter. While in Greece, we were accepted. We were Greek citizens. We were not Jewish, we were not Christians, we were just citizens. Tolerance has an implied judgment built in. To tolerate someone or something defines that the person or thing is bad or wrong. When we say tolerance, our behavior, what it's really saying is that we consider your behavior wrong, but because it is such a gracious person, I'll put you up with it. Whether you are tolerant or intolerant, you carry judgment. The other choice is acceptance. We all have something to contribute to the world, and in acceptance things as is. We won't worry about who's right and who is wrong. Treat everyone with dignity and respect, and due to every human being. Each and every child is a child of the universe. We all have something to contribute to the world, and in accepting things as they are without carrying judgment, we are able to treat others with dignity and respect.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jack. We really, really appreciate your time.
There are a lot of stories I could tell, but it's going to take a lot of time. I understand that we don't have that kind of time.
Let me share something real quick just to bring this to today's world, because I think that's one thing that's important for our generation to realize. We spoke to a class, and there was a gentleman from an African country. I can't remember if it was like Somalia, or it was somewhere there's lots of war and genocide going on today. And he was in Memphis studying, and he started crying when he heard my dad's story. He wrote my dad a poem because he had actually watched his entire family beheaded. And this was like a sophomore or junior in high school. So it's not just something that happened 70, 80 years ago. It's something that's happening every day today.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Sarah Beth. And I think that's part of our mission here today, is not only to reflect on these important stories, but to take steps both within ourselves and in our greater society to ensure that such atrocities never happen again. So I want to thank everyone for their time, especially Jack and Nate. I just want to reiterate one more time, we work with the Tennessee Holocaust Commission. I'm a staff member. And we were founded by the state legislature. We exist to share the stories of Tennessee survivors, liberators, and witnesses, and to promote Holocaust education across the state. So if you know anyone in Tennessee, an educator or otherwise, who's excited about sharing stories like those of Jack and Nate, please feel free to reach out. Our website information should be in the chat. And if you have any questions about anything you heard today, please don't hesitate to email either Sherry, or you can email me at tnholcomb@vanderbilt.edu. You can find all that information on our website. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sherry and Brian. But thank you all so much for your time. And I hope that you found this as meaningful as I did.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, we just wanted to thank, on behalf of ZBT and all of the brothers on the call, as well as not on the call, we just wanted to thank Jack and Nate for sharing your stories. We know that Zoom is not always the best way to interact, but I know that you were able to reach so many ZBT brothers from all across the country, which is so meaningful and so important. And I know that everyone was really touched by the story, so we're so thankful for all of you. And also to all of the ZBT brothers on the call, thank you so much for spending an hour and a half on the call and learning from everyone and making sure that the stories don't stop here, that we share those stories with our brothers and our community members and our family members, so that something like this, a tragedy like this, never happens again, and that we never forget, especially again today being Holocaust Remembrance Day. And then again, a huge thank you to the Tennessee Holocaust Commission. Thank you so much for working and partnering with me and setting this up with us. And we're really lucky to partner with you. And we know this is just the beginning of a great partnership. And if anyone has any questions, again, reach out to me. All of the ZBT brothers have my email because I sent you the link for this. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Brian, do you have anything to add?
Just one more thank you to our speakers, our partners, our guests, participants, everyone who found this as a time to come together, a time to remember, time to reflect, and all them be together. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Libby, do you want to add anything too? Sorry. Libby is our CEO of ZBT. So.
Hi, everybody. And just really appreciate everybody taking the time to listen and to learn from these amazing men, and that we could all come together this evening to do this. And especially at a time when it's so challenging to interact with people, but I'm so happy we could come together on this platform. So again, thank you so much for making this a possibility.
Thank you. And then Larry, who's the Tennessee Holocaust Commission chair, thank you again for joining us and for meeting all the ZBT brothers and to listen. Do you have anything you would like to add to wrap up the conversation?
Sherry, thank you. On behalf of the Tennessee Holocaust Commission, I'm happy that we were able to share these stories with ZBTs from across the country. Mr. Cohen, of course, is one of our regular speakers, speaks very frequently for the commission. I don't know that I've ever met Mr. Taffel, but his stories also are so reminiscent of the survivors and liberators that we serve here in Tennessee. Each year we probably reach close to 100,000 high school and junior high school students across the state. And we're very happy to bring you into our fold. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Have a good night and stay safe and stay healthy. So thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.